Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today we're going to discuss Meteor. You guys voted and Meteor was the clear winner by getting more than double the amount of votes of the next leading skill. So we're going to go ahead and discuss the pros, the cons, some suggestions for the skill itself, and then of course we're going to go through a few different builds with it and just show how it works, some of the interactions, and just how you can build it differently. And then we'll go ahead and at the same time that this video releases, I'm going to go ahead and throw you a Meteor build as well, just so you can see it in action. Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so let's start with some pros for Meteor. Meteor itself is a gorgeous looking skill. We'll just fire it off once here. And when it comes down, it's got that nice impact. It really looks like a meteor. Got nice flamage, nice AoE, has a little burning ground effect where you can see that it hit the ground. But the main problem with it right off the bat is the amount of time for it to come down once you've cast it. If you've got enemies right here and you need to attack them, it doesn't feel very good to cast this and then wait 1.5 seconds for it to come down. It's just a crazy amount of time, 1.5 seconds by default for that skill to come all the way down to the ground. It's a really long time and it makes it feel bad, and right off the bat you're going to want to build into the fall speed, which you can get into, and you can reduce it to where it's, half a second for those meteors to come down. Of course, nobody wants to spend 5 points just making the meteor faster so you can target it better, but sometimes it's a requirement in order to make it feel good. So going over some of the nodes for this skill tree, there are a lot of unique ones that are strictly unique to Meteor itself, and they feel really good. One of them being that you can recover up to 45% of the mana cost of the skill itself over the next few seconds after you've used it, as long as you don't cast it again, otherwise it'll negate that amount that you haven't gotten back. Other things such as doing more damage with the tags that you don't have for the skill tree, which is a little ridiculous. So if you put on some necklace or some added void damage, which you can get on an amulet and you can get on a chest piece, you can get added void damage for this and then get a more damage multiplier to all the non-fire types, so all the other elements. That's a very unique node that you don't see anywhere else in the game on any other skill tree, so that's pretty cool. And then another unique thing that this skill does is, while it interacts with another skill, which isn't unique in this game, many skills do that, you can actually make another skill give you mana and become a mana generator through the use of using this skill recently. That's a really cool interaction, and the build that I put out for you guys is going to be a fireball / meteor build combo, which is going to revolve around Craterborn, which is a really cool buff. So some other cool things you can do with Meteor, but they're not really unique to a skill in general, is you can get extra projectiles. You can force those projectiles to shoot in a line. You can increase the radius, reduce the radius. You can increase the fall speed, something you can also do with like Avalanche for the Shaman. You can also get projectiles, which is pretty cool. This isn't something you can do with Avalanche for the Shaman, so it's kind of unique in that way for a meteor or something coming out of the sky towards the ground. And you can build into shrapnel and make shrapnel do more damage. You can give the shrapnel speed and range. You can make it pierce, which will reduce its speed and range, which is kind of negates it, but it's still cool that you can build into these different things. And then you can build into crit chance, and you can build into mana efficiency, so all the normal things that you can get on a skill tree, but at least all of them are included in this one, which makes it really nice to use. But like I said, the main problem with Meteor is that unless built very specifically, it can feel really bad, especially trying to use it as a main skill. While it can definitely put out damage, and while it can feel and look really cool, the problem for the most part is waiting for it to come down, unless you spend a lot of your points into increasing the cast speed and the fall speed so that it can actually be used quickly enough in combat to feel good. And we'll get into that, and it is possible to do. It's just unfortunate that you have to spend so many points into those things to get it that way. And that pretty much covers the cons for the build as well. So getting into some suggestions for the build, something that I would definitely like to see in the Meteor tree itself is actually having added damage inside of it. Now, while added damage for it is applied at 600% effectiveness, which is a huge amount and feels really good, it's why you can get some really good meteor damage out of it. It would feel really good if it also had somewhere in the tree some added damage, or even some added non-fire type damage to synergize along with Stardust, the non-fire damage type multiplier. Other things, it would be awesome if the default amount of it was 1 second or less fall speed, not 1.5 seconds. It just feels way too long right at the beginning. And another thing, if you play Meteor, now while I do like the single projectile Meteor that comes down as a default, I just wish there was more of a way to make it cover the entire screen. And while you can get multiple Meteors and they can fall down in kind of a bigger AoE, it would just be really cool to rain an entire shower of meteors. There should be a node in here somewhere to turn it into a complete shower where your whole screen just has meteors coming down on the entire thing and have it follow you, and that would be awesome. You would obviously have some reduction in damage for how many projectiles were coming out, but it would be absolutely awesome to see that, because full screen AoEs, even if they don't do a massive amount of damage, would just be epic. I could see the mana cost being really high, having a really high cooldown if you did that, but it would be epic if you could round up all the mobs and then just unleash hell from the sky. Other suggestions, which I don't really want to copy too much, that are in other skill trees, they like to make each skill individually feel as different as possible. There's no ignite inside of the skill tree, which I thought was really weird. You would think that as a meteor comes down, it's gonna leave behind burning ground or some sort of secondary igniting effect on the ground for enemies that run through. I'm surprised it doesn't have a more damage modifier against ignited enemies. Maybe you ignite them with fireball, then hit them with meteor, and you can get some more damage out of it that way. There are some other synergies inside of this that it is missing, but other than that, I do like the skill itself. I just wish that it felt better to use and play with. It is still lacking there a little bit. But with all that, let's go ahead and start getting into the different ways that you can build it and show some examples on how you would use it. So let's start with build number 1. For this build, we're going to be built into a single projectile that hits in a huge area, has a 100% chance to crit, and is going to do a lot of damage. Now, we're not wearing any gear, we have no passives, so it's going to be hard to really show you the stats of this, but we built with 1 point into force of impact, 2 points into rapid descent to make it come down faster. This 40% increase is going to take it down to that 1 second mark so that it's going to feel not so bad coming down. 4 points in extinction is going to give it 8% more base crit chance. Now, if you're wearing this with a one-hander and a catalyst, you add that to the 5% normal base, you get up to the 6% on a catalyst, plus this 8% is going to give you roughly 19% or up to 19% base crit chance, which means you only need 400% increased spell crit chance in order to have a 100% crit chance with this build, with that setup, with the one-handed and the catalyst. And if you do that, you can easily get almost 3/4 of that just from passives alone, and then you just need a little bit on gear. You can get that just on the amulet or even on your one-handed scepter. If you don't build into increased spell damage and increased fire damage, you could put spell crit on there and it would all be covered and you'd be guaranteed that crit. Then we have 90% crit multiplier for more damage. We have 5 points in crushing force. Now this is a one-shotter. This is what we're aiming for, is to do the most damage to things that are at full life that we haven't touched yet with any other skills. So you have a 70% multiplicative more damage against enemies at full health. Then you have 20% more damage with Infernal Descent, and then 3 points in Apocalyptic Impact for 90% increased area. And then on top of that, with the large meteor chance, there's a 40% chance when you cast it for the area to be another 100% larger, which just is a massive amount. It takes up about half your screen. I'm going to go ahead and cast it. The mana cost isn't too bad. The DPS with this is at 307. And when we cast this, you'll notice this is a large one. It took up the entire circle. That it is the exact same circle with the setup as the training dummy ring that has around it. A normal one is going to be right inside the circle, and then that 100% larger, as you can see there, is just huge. Now remember, this is completely naked. We got nothing on. You're critting for 1500 damage against the training dummy. You can easily make that crit for 200, 300k without even getting into the exalted realm. And if you get some idols and you get over 300 mana, you can get even a little bit higher than that. You're even looking at, with some min-max tier 20 gear, about 500,000 damage with a single projectile hit like that, which is a lot of damage and it's definitely going to kill everything. The problem is when in between that, you're going to have to find something else to use. Fire Elemental Nova, Fireball, which you haven't synergized it, but again, it feels really good for throwing it down. It does do more damage against things with full life. So at that point, you know, against high health rares that take a few hits to kill or bosses, it doesn't feel as good because it loses some damage after the first hit on them, but still a super viable way to play it, and it just feels good. So this is kind of more of what I would call a multiplayer build, just based on the fact you're going to let everyone else do the tanking and everything, and then when they kind of round things up or you need some extra damage, you come in with that one meteor that just absolutely annihilates stuff and does a really big hit. Yeah, there are other skills and more balancings needed in the game because other things can do more damage faster than this, but it's still cool if you were to come in and you just cast a few of these real quick down on the guys and it just absolutely annihilates them. It takes up the entire screen, and it's just a really nice visual effect. For build number 2, we're going to spec into this to have a lot more meteors. We almost want the maximum amount of them that you can get, but at the same time, we're going to increase the mana cost by taking that secondary projectile, and your amount of mana that you're spending goes so high, over 100 mana, that you're going to have a way to have mana back. So you can either cast once and then focus, which is really boring, use Mana Strike and be in melee range, or go ranged and be really slow mana generator, or you can synergize it with Fireball and turn Fireball into a mana generator for you to get some mana back, and that's what we're going to do here. So you're still going to do really good damage with this. In fact, our DPS meter on this, or damage per second, is actually going to end up being much higher than you would get with a single projectile because we'll have increased fire damage. Now, of course, that ratio will change because Craterborn's 60% increased fire damage is a lot when you're completely naked because you don't have anything that will diminish the return of it. However, the DPS of it will be quite high. You're going to get multiple hits in with your meteors. You're going to get 5 of them actually coming down. You can still get 100% crit chance with this, especially with a one-handed weapon along with a catalyst, because you're still building into extinction with that base crit chance, which is huge. But you're also turning Fireball into gaining 6 mana every time that you use it, and you can make Fireball cast for free, and that's what you're going to want to do to be able to cast it really quickly, get your mana back, and throw another meteor down as quickly as possible. So with this build, we got 1 point in Force of Impact, 3 points in Rapid Descent, 1 point in Twin Meteors. This will make a second one fall, but it increases the mana cost by 70, which is huge. It puts us from that 60 mana cost up to 130. You wear a Sorcery Staff, it's even worse. 3 points in Meteor Shower gives you another 3 meteors. It is possible to get one more with Rain of Fire if you happen to build into a Exalted item with +3 or +4, or a regular crafted item with +1 or +2. You can get even more skill points in here. You can grab that 6th meteor, or you can build more into Craterborn or into some of the more damage. Now, we also went up top, got 2 points in Crushing Force for some more damage modifier, but we really wanted 3 points in Apocalyptic Impact because that 90% area helps to offset the 45% radius that you lost for taking the extra meteors. Now, with the 3 points in Extinction, you'll still have a 30% chance for each meteor to be a large meteor, which will increase the area by 100%. So typically you'd get 1 or 2 of them out of every cast being a larger one. And then, of course, 2 points in Craterborn gives you 60% increased fire damage. It's going to give you cast speed. And then for 4 seconds, you get the Craterborn buff, which is going to give you +6 mana every time that you cast Fireball manually yourself. And with this build, it looks cool. You're going to have a lot of explosions coming down, and it's a bit of a bigger area. So even though each explosion itself is going to be a little bit smaller, you still end up hitting about the same area as a huge wide single projectile. And then if you notice, your crits are hitting for just a little bit less damage than you were getting before. You're critting for about 1,000 damage where you were getting 1,500 with it. But remember, you're getting 5 hits with this. So the overall damage that you're doing against a single target that gets hit by all 5 is going to end up being more with the projectiles. And of course, you'll be casting Fireball in between this because that mana cost is just huge. But this way is definitely my favorite way to play it. But we're going to go ahead and get into build number 3. And then for build number 3, we built into Shrapnel, and you also have some meteors. You have multiple meteors that come down. And with this, you're going to end up putting 2 points into Craterborn, 3 points into Shattering Star, so that for each meteor that comes down, there's a 100% chance that shrapnel will explode outwards. 5 points in Jagged Fragments, so those fragments deal 250% more damage. 1 point in Rapid Breakup, so the speed and ranged is increased. And this is because we put 1 point in Piercing Remnants, which makes shrapnel pierce, but slows it down a little bit. So we increase that with 1 point in the Rapid Breakup just to kind of counteract that -20% with a +30%. Then we also built into getting extra meteors with 1 point in Force of Impact, 3 points in Rapid Descent, 1 point in Twin Meteors, and then 3 points in Meteor Shower. So there'll be a total of 5 meteors that come down. And of course, we're based in that shrapnel. However, the problems with this, the shrapnel doesn't go very far. Even if you manage to put all of your points into the rapid breakup, it's still not as far as you would like shrapnel. Shrapnel is something that normally goes many times the diameter of an impact. Shrapnel usually flies, so shrapnel is not something I would expect your circle or your diameter of your impact to be decent size, and then the shrapnel barely goes the same distance or barely goes outside of the circle. It's just kind of crazy because you think impact, shrapnel is something that is very fast and it's something that goes very far, even if the damage is already less, which it is. Now, luckily, in this skill tree, they did make it synergize with the same tags of Meteor. They didn't make it go physical, so that's awesome. It's still fire, it's still spell, so it will scale nicely with it. And even with this 250% more damage, it ends up only doing about 1/6 the damage of Meteor hits, even if you have multiple projectiles going off. So is it really worth it? I don't know. Is it cool looking? Yes. And go ahead and give an example of what it looks like. You can go ahead, you'll have your 5 meteors come down, you'll see the shrapnel shoots out, and your meteors are hitting for about 300, 400 damage, while the shrapnel is hitting for a maximum of about 80. It's hitting for about 50 to 80. There we had 57, 70, and 80. So you're doing about one fifth of the damage with the shrapnel, even with being built into it and having it have a 250% more modifier, which is a little bit ridiculous. Now, it is fire, it is spell. If you build into 100% crit with a one-hand and with the catalyst, you can make them all crit and have 100% crit with both the meteors and with the shrapnel. And then it does some decent damage, but I'd rather just build around fireball and meteor, because with having the multiple meteors and building around shrapnel, you have no way, obviously didn't churn fireball into a mana generator, and with a mana cost of 130, there's just no way to keep this build up. So those 3 builds are going to wrap up the 3 different ways that I play it. The 4th one would deal with having more damage from non-fire types, but I'm not going to throw gear on to show that one. But basically, if you wear the amulet and the chest piece, they give you flat void damage. You can build into this, and it's just as viable as building into fire and spell. But lastly, I just wanted to show off some of the nodes that we didn't discuss that are pretty cool. One of them being that the meteors fall in a line. 2, that you can increase the frequency a bunch for that with a whole bunch of meteors. You can have 6 of them. And then, of course, we didn't go into the Celestial Celerity, which gives you cast speed and fall speed, actually making it feel really good. But this increases the mana cost by 60% on top of the multi-projectile being another added 70. Altogether, you have a mana cost of 241, which is a little ridiculous for how little that this skill does, which tells you that some changes are definitely needed to this tree. I feel like if you're going to pay 240 mana for something, which means it's a one-time cast, this needs to have a long cooldown, and it needs to be a full screen, just all meteors coming down and a big-ass AoE, even, full screen, dealing damage to everything that you have, and maybe come with about a 20-second cooldown or something that's going to make it worth it. But right now, I mean, we're talking a 241 mana cost, and this is not wearing a sorcery staff. You can actually boost it another 40 to 50% up, which means you can break the 300 mana cost for one single use of Meteor. And this is, while it looks great and looks cool, we shoot them all in a line, they come down really fast, but that's it. That's all that I paid for 240 mana, which is a little ridiculous. Yeah, so the other thing that we built into with that was that we also get 45% of the mana recovered, so we actually get back about 110 of that over the next 3 seconds, so we actually get quite a bit back, which is nice. But if you didn't put those points in, I mean, it still doesn't take away the fact that it's a 241 mana cost, which is a little ridiculous for it. But it's really cool how it comes down in a line. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough points to increase the area to build into the crit chance with it, and a few of the other things you couldn't get into the fireball projectiles. But overall, it's a fun skill to mess around with, but it's just lacking some stuff. It needs something to boost it to a point where more people are going to want to build around it and use it. It's not that it's not viable, it's more of just every other skill feels better to use, whether it be quicker, whether it's just easier to take out enemies in a quicker manner, or whether it's just not feeling as clunky as it is to use Meteor. Not that there aren't any builds that can't utilize it, there are viable ways. It's missing something, and I hope they can figure out what that is. Like I said, I think a few things of it is that if you're going to have a mana cost that big, you need to get more out of it. You need to have the ability to basically round up mobs and then just do a full screen AoE where it kills them and have a 10 or a 20-second cooldown. You know, something kind of like Avalanche where you have meteors falling, I guess, a cast and forget, so lots of projectiles are coming down for a few seconds and just hitting everywhere. I think it would feel much better if it was more like that versus just trying to have a single projectile as default coming down and hitting in a small area. Not that I don't like it, I think it's cool. I just think that for it to be better, it needs to change it up a little bit. Anyways, that's going to be it for this skill discussion. Don't forget to vote for the next one. Skill number 6 of vote poll will be up at the same time that I release this. And as always, stay safe, travelers.